What I am saying is that it is vital we listen to women and really hear them and put their voices at the center of these discussions. And I believe that the more we do this, the better societies we will be able to build, which invest in women in the ways they really need. Hello, everyone. 안녕하세요, 여러분. Thank you very much, everyone, for having me here to speak. 초대해 주셔서 감사합니다. I am the BBC's correspondent here in Seoul, and I want to speak to you through the lens of my reporting here. When I arrived in Seoul, almost 2 years ago now, my then producer turned to me and said, defiantly, "Jean, we women, we're on a baby-making strike. We're just not prepared to do this anymore," she said. Ever since, I've been bombarded, as I know we all have, with articles and statistics about Korea's falling birth rate. Every day there seems to be another policy proposal aimed at tackling it, or another cash incentive for couples to have children. But it seems that nothing has cut through, because all the while, Korea's birth rate has continued to fall. And last week, we heard it had hit a new low of 0.72. And here in Seoul, it's now 0.55. When you take into account that some women will have more than one child, we are now looking at a situation where nearly every other woman here in the capital is choosing not to have children. So about a year ago, I set out to try and understand why this was. Not by speaking to the demographers or the sociologists, but by talking to the women themselves. I traveled around the country meeting women who have children and those who don't want them. Not because, and I do want to make this clear, I believe that women should have children, but because I wanted to better understand what young women in this country want and need, in a way that I feel the politicians often don't, not just here in Korea, but the world over. And so I'd like to share with you some of what they told me through 3 women who I hope we're going to be able to see on screen now. Yeah. Because I think their stories tell us so much. So this is Yejin in the middle, it is Stella on the right, and Chungyun on the left. Yejin in the middle, she's 30, and she's a television producer, and she loves her job, but it's grueling. She works until 8 o'clock most nights, and that's without the overtime. Then she feels pressure to study in her spare time to get better at her job so she doesn't fall behind and become, in her words, a failure. She says she barely has time to look after herself, so she just can't see how she could raise a child. She told me, totally casually, that sometimes at the weekends, she goes to get put on an intravenous drip, just so that she has enough energy to go back to work the following Monday. Let that sink in. She's also watched her sister and her colleagues quit their jobs to have babies and then not be able to return to work because they've had to take on all of the childcare, and it's just been too much to juggle with these intense working hours. And she's yet to date somebody who she thinks would be prepared to share the childcare and the housework, and so she's given up on dating and having children altogether. Enter Jungyun on the right here. Jungyun worked for an NGO, and she loved her job too, but she was a freelancer. So when she gave birth, it made more sense for her to give up work rather than her husband. But she thought she'd be able to return to work quickly once the child was in daycare. But then the social and the financial pressures kicked in. It was too expensive, and there was too much judgment from those around her. So she stayed at home, and 7 years later, now with 2 children, she's still at home. Her husband doesn't help with the childcare. So much so that Chungyun is in what she calls a single parenting marriage. What a phrase. It's one I hadn't heard before. Jungyun has been really miserable and angry. She's educated, and she was taught that men and women were equal. And so she couldn't accept what was happening. She was totally oblivious, she told me, about what it would mean to be a mother. So she started documenting her struggles, and she published them online as webtoons so that other women would know what she wishes she had known before it was too late. And Jungyun is now the author of 3 successful comic books. But if Jungyun didn't know enough, then Stella told me that she knows too much. Stella on the right here. Actually, I think, is she on your right? No, she's on your left. Stella's on your left. Stella is a teacher at Hagwon, an after-school academy where 98% of parents in this country send their children to study after work at great expense for fear that if they don't, their children will fall behind and become, back to Yejin's words, failures. Stella is 39 and she's been married for 6 years, and she didn't plan not to have children, but working at the Hagwon has made her realize it wouldn't be possible because she couldn't afford to send her child to one of these after-school classes, especially as she feels she'd have to quit her job in the first place to have the child. But Stella was a total natural with the kids. She lit up as she taught them. "Look, they're so cute," she kept telling me. "I wish I could have one, but I know too much." I want to tell you too about Minji, and I can't show you her photo because she's not told her parents yet that she won't be having children, and she knows they're going to be really disappointed. But Minji confided in me that her childhood and even her 20s were unhappy because she'd been forced to study every evening and at the weekends at these Hagwons, and now she doesn't want to inflict this misery on someone else. She has firmly concluded that Korea isn't a place where children can be happy. Of all the women I met, Minji was the most staunch in her conviction that she couldn't and wouldn't have children. She's nearly lost her husband because of it, because he is desperate for a child. So imagine my surprise when Minji said to me that often her heart wavers, that sometimes she pines for a child, but because she knows the reality of what it is like to grow up here, her head has to override her heart. You'll see how this theme of knowing too much comes up again and again. Yejin knows too much about the discrimination women face when trying to re-enter the workforce. Stella knows too much about the financial burden the Hagwons place on parents. And Minji knows too much about the pressure and competition that children come under. And Jungyun, who has children, well, she didn't know enough. If knowing the reality of what it means to be a mother in this country is what's stopping these women from having children, then it's this reality that needs to change. The biggest surprise for me when reporting this story was that I thought I would meet women who resolutely didn't want children. But instead, I met women who have struggled and wavered with this life-changing decision. Women who, if circumstances were different, would very possibly have chosen otherwise. But the long and inflexible working hours and the poor division of childcare at home means women here still feel forced to choose between having a family and having a career. And this in turn makes having a child unaffordable for many. And so increasingly, women are choosing their careers. Because the women I've met all love their jobs, and they've got full and rich lives and interesting hobbies, and they are just not prepared to sacrifice these things to take on this traditional role of mother that society often still demands of them. I'd like to segue just for a moment to tell you about Minsung, because Minsung's story is a little different. Minsung told me she wanted 10 children. I think she was exaggerating, but only a little bit. But she doesn't have any. How come? Minsung is bisexual, and she sees herself being in a relationship with a woman. But same-sex couples can't get married here, and unmarried people can't easily take advantage of sperm donations and IVF treatment. Not Minsung, nor a single one of the women I spoke to wants more government handouts. What they are asking for is deeper societal and structural change. They want to work fewer, more flexible hours, and crucially, they want their partners to do the same so they can share the childcare and they don't have to choose between having a family and having a career. And they don't want their prospective children to be subjected to the same intense education and competition that blighted their own childhoods and happiness. And there are many who want to be supported to have children outside the traditional confines of a heterosexual marriage. I know some of these things aren't easy to fix. Of course, it's easier to hand out money or to give a free this, that, or the other. But there are places to start. Just take the working hours. One major company recently introduced the trial of a 4-day week. But when you look at the details, the employees still have to work the same number of hours, only split over 4 days. And somebody told me that there's actually pressure to work more now to make up for getting the day off. Another person I know pushed their large employer to offer more flexible hours for mothers. They were told more flexible hours were already on offer. Mothers could choose to work 9 to 6 or 10 to 7. This isn't how it should work. I know the government and the companies here are taking this really seriously. This is one of the biggest conundrums that this country faces. But these financial incentives don't seem to be working, and the company solutions often fall short. How do I know this? Because I talked to the women, and this is what they told me. I'm not claiming to have the answers. I know this is complex and difficult. What I am saying is that it is vital we listen to women and really hear them and put their voices at the center of these discussions. And I believe that the more we do this, the better societies we will be able to build, which invest in women in the ways they really need. Thank you. 감사합니다.